contempt. The Kuwaitis were very tough. They wanted us out, and we assumed that we had a future together with them. We had worked with Kuwait for years, been very close to them. We had spent large amounts of money, and it was unthinkable to us that we were being thrown out.
The oil companies were trying to get over the psychological barrier, as it were, of knowing that no longer do they control the oil industry in Kuwait, that this is a new era.
Kun öljyyhtiöille valkeni, että Kuwait aikoi kansallistaa koko tuotannon, BP ja Gulf vaativat korvaukseksi $2 miljardia. Kuwait maksoi vain 50 miljoonaa.
The majors, the international companies, and the smaller companies found that they no longer had these big reserves of oil in the oil-producing countries, and so the number one issue for them became to replace those reserves, and that meant a great global oil hunt.
Yhtiöt tehostivat öljyn etsintää Pohjanmeren hyisillä vesillä.
It was a gamble, but we knew we had a tremendous reserve there. We were lucky in one sense in that by the time North Sea oil, particularly Fortisfield, came onto the market, the oil price had gone up 4 or 5 times from the price at which the decision had been taken. And it transformed the industry.
Pohjanmeren esiintymät alkoivat tuottaa enemmän öljyä kuin monet OPEC-maat. Oli tavallaan kohtalon ivaa, että OPEC-maiden hinnankorotusten tähden öljyä kannatti tuottaa vaikeissakin oloissa.
During the 70s, when the Shah of Iran was there, he wanted to build out of Iran a super military power in the area. He wanted to raise the price of oil for reasons other than economical reasons. The Saudis wanted to keep the price of oil going up very slightly, reasonably, so we do not hurt the economy of the West and we do not hurt the annual increases in demand.
The shock of the oil embargo and the great increase in prices drove Western countries and industrialized countries to bring into being conservation policies that before they ignored. It changed the whole situation. It reversed the power equation. And the Shah, like other rulers in the region, suddenly found himself without the kind of revenues to carry out the kind of grandiose and ambitious schemes that he saw at the beginning of the 1970s. The great increase in the price of oil, the power that oil gave, the illusion of power that the oil gave to the Shah, helped to destroy him. It was kind of a poisoned chalice for the Shah.
Iranilaiset tekivät vallankumouksen. Se mullisti öljymaailman perustuksiaan myöten. Kun opiskelijat ja uskonnolliset fundamentalistit tulvahtivat Teheranin kaduille, Lähi-idän öljyn saannin turvaava järjestelmä romahti.
The Shah, who had been the policeman of the region, could no longer serve that function. And when he fell, that Western influence declined seriously.
Vain kourallinen kansalaisia oli katsomassa, kun Shahi lähti maanpakoon 15. tammikuuta 1979.
The fall of the Shah was, of course, precipitated by strikes in the oil fields that reduced uranium production to zero from 5 million barrels a day. And it had a disconcerting effect on the oil market.
2 viikkoa myöhemmin miljoonat iranilaiset tunneksivat kaduilla, kun länttä leppymättä vastustava Ajatollah Khomeini tuli maanpaosta valtaan.
The Iranian Revolution caused the price of oil to jump several times, and the companies were panicking. And the price of oil kept going up and up again.
Länsimaiden autoilijoille toinen öljykriisi merkitsi vuoden 1973 toisintoa. Vaikka presidentti Jimmy Carter olikin varoittanut uudesta energiapulasta, se vei hänen mahdollisuutensa jatkaa virassa.
Tonight I want to have an unpleasant talk with you about a problem that's unprecedented in our history. With the exception of preventing war, this is the greatest challenge that our country will face during our lifetime. The world is not prepared for the future. During the 1950s, people used twice as much oil as during the 1940s.
I've been sitting here since 8 o'clock this morning. How about I didn't go to work yesterday because I had no gas?
During the 1960s, we used twice as much as during the 1950s. And in each of those decades, more oil was consumed than in all of man's previous history combined.
The oil price actually touched $40 a barrel. Everybody thought there was now a permanent shortage of oil. But of course, with 20/20 hindsight, you could look back and see that there was no shortage. There was no actual shortage. There was a panic, there was hoarding, but no shortage. But virtually no one saw that at the time.
We thought that we could get away with practically anything in terms of increasing the oil prices. I think that is when, that is the zenith of OPEC power. And perhaps at that time, we allowed that feeling of power to go into our head.
Wien syyskuussa 1980. OPEC oli valmistautunut viettämään järjestön 20-vuotisjuhlaa. Kokous päättyi kohta avauksen jälkeen sekasortoon, kun OPECin yhteisrintama hajosi. Irakin vahva mies Saddam Hussein oli hyökännyt OPECin kuuluvan naapurinsa kimppuun.
You had the feeling sitting with Saddam of being in the presence of a coiled boa constrictor who was ready to strike at any moment. But this man, very ambitious man with great designs, and with an absolute ruthlessness to carry them out, would mark Middle Eastern history very deeply.
He saw in the demise of the Iranian state and in the demise of the Shah the great opportunity for the emergence of Baghdad as the dominant power in the region and as the dominant capital in the region.
It was inevitable that somebody like Saddam would venture into adventures like the Iran-Iraqi war.
Hussein hyökkäsi yllättäen Iraniin.
Very much in his mind was the possibility either to control the oil fields of southwestern Iran or to destroy them, to make sure that Iran would not have the kind of power based on its oil production that Iraq would have in the future.
Sota vaikeutti öljytoimituksia Iranista ja Irakista. Maailman öljymarkkinat vääristyivät ja johtivat OPECin harhaan.
I think, in essence, that war concealed the weaknesses that OPEC was already feeling, in the sense that the war further reduced the Iraqi-Iranian supply and gave us a misguided sense that we could continue on doing what we were doing, keeping the price of oil very high in face of falling demand.
Syy Lähi-idän öljyn kysynnän hupenemiseen oli Alaskassa. Kolme yhtiötä, BP, Exxon ja Arco, yrittivät kiireesti hyödyntää pohjoisen tunturan ikiraudan alta löydettyjä valtavia öljyesiintymiä. Tulos oli tarumainen.
I think the first thing that I knew about BP in Alaska was when my old friend and colleague Monty Pennell, who was in charge of BP's exploration activities worldwide, came into our weekly meeting one morning and said, well, chaps, he said, I'm afraid we've stumbled into more oil, and it's in Alaska